Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. That evening began like any other. The late sun was spilling through the kitchen window, laying long golden lines across the table where I just set down 2 cups of tea. My son had called earlier, saying he wanted to talk. The word lingered in my mind all day. When children grow up, those words, "we need to talk," carry a different weight. It's no longer about homework or curfew. It's about life, choices, and the unspoken things that lie between generations. He arrived right on time, as he always does. Michael has his father's punctuality and my way of overthinking things. I noticed the way he ran a hand through his hair before sitting, something he did only when nervous. I tried to lighten the moment with small talk about the garden, the neighbors, the new bakery down the street. But he wasn't listening. His eyes stayed low, tracing the rim of his cup as if the tea might give him the courage to speak. "Mom," he finally said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "There's something I've been keeping to myself." My heart skipped. For a moment, I feared the worst: health, trouble, regret. Every mother knows that fear. It sits quietly in the corner of your mind, waiting for nights like these. I smiled to steady him. "Whatever it is, just tell me. You know you can." He looked up, and for the first time in years, I saw the little boy he used to be. Uncertain, looking for reassurance. The clock ticked behind him, loud and slow, and I could almost hear the rhythm of our shared years. He began to talk, haltingly at first, about pressure, about feeling lost, about how life hadn't turned out the way he thought it would. I kept nodding, listening, though each word seemed to press heavier on my chest. There was no anger in his tone, only exhaustion. "I've been pretending I'm okay," he said, "but I'm not." Those words hit me harder than I expected. A mother can patch scraped knees and soothe nightmares, but she can't mend an adult child's quiet ache. I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. It was the same hand I used to guide his when he first learned to write his name. He squeezed it once, and I could feel years of silence breaking between us. He confessed things I'd never known, mistakes he'd made, choices he regretted, moments he wished he could redo. None of them were shocking on their own, but together they painted a picture of a son who had carried too much alone. I wanted to interrupt, to tell him he wasn't failing, that everyone drifts sometimes, but I stayed quiet. He needed to speak. When he finished, there was a long pause. The sound of the clock filled the air again. I thought about all the times I'd brushed past his quick, "I'm fine" over the phone, all the times I'd believed him. I realized then that my silence had taught him to stay silent too. "I didn't want to disappoint you," he said quietly. "You've always been so strong." I took a deep breath. Being strong doesn't mean not hurting, Michael. It means facing what hurts together. He nodded, his eyes glistening in the dim kitchen light. I could tell that, for the first time in a long while, he felt seen. I didn't have all the answers. Maybe I never did. But that night wasn't about fixing. It was about hearing. As he stood to leave later, he hugged me tightly, longer than usual. "Thank you for listening," he whispered. I told him, "Thank you for trusting me." After he left, I sat back at the table, staring at the 2 cups of tea now cold and untouched. The air still held the warmth of his words, and though my heart ached, I felt something else too: relief. For years I had feared distance between us, but maybe it was only silence that stood in the way. That night, as I turned off the lights and looked at his empty chair, I realized how much strength it takes to tell the truth, to yourself, to the ones you love, and to the person who raised you. I didn't sleep much, but for the first time in years, I felt like we were closer than ever. The next morning, sunlight crept through the curtains and fell softly across the kitchen floor, the same place where our conversation had ended the night before. I sat at the table again, tracing the faint ring a teacup had left behind. It felt strange, comforting and heavy at the same time. My son's words echoed in my mind like a quiet song that refused to fade. He had carried so much on his own, and I had been too blind to see it. For years, I believed giving him space meant giving him freedom. But maybe, in my silence, I'd built a wall instead. As mothers, we're taught to let go gradually, to trust that they'll come back when they need us. But what no one tells you is how helpless that waiting can feel. I decided to call him, just to hear his voice. The phone rang twice before he answered. His tone was lighter than the night before, and I could hear the faint sounds of the city behind him. Traffic, footsteps, a dog barking. Life was moving on, even as I sat there frozen in reflection. "Morning, Mom," he said. "I was actually going to call you." That sentence alone brought a small smile to my face. He told me he'd gone for a walk, said it helped clear his head. There was something new in his voice, less guarded, more present. I didn't ask him what he planned to do next. I just listened, letting his words fill the quiet corners of my morning. When we hung up, I poured myself another cup of tea and stepped outside to the garden. The roses were blooming again after weeks of dull weather. I crouched down and ran my hand across the petals, still damp with dew. It reminded me of when Michael was small and would bring me flowers from the yard, his little hands always covered in dirt. I thought of how proud he'd look, holding something fragile as if it were a treasure. That memory led me to another, the time he came home from school upset because a teacher had said he wasn't trying hard enough. He'd been so angry, so misunderstood. I'd sat him down and told him that people only judge what they can see, not what you're carrying inside. I realized now that I should have reminded him of that more often, even as an adult. Later that afternoon, I found myself organizing old photo albums. Each picture seemed to tell a part of our story. Birthdays, graduations, trips, the quiet ordinary days that had slipped through unnoticed. One photo stopped me for a long time. Michael at 12, sitting at the same table, his head resting on his hands, laughing at something I'd said. The sunlight in that photo looked just like today's. I felt tears well up, but they weren't from sadness. They came from gratitude. That evening he came by again, unannounced. "I didn't want to be alone tonight," he said simply. I didn't need an explanation. We sat together on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft orange and pink. The air smelled of rain and earth, and for a moment it felt like time had slowed down. He started talking again, but this time it wasn't a confession. It was sharing. About his plans, small hopes, things he wanted to change. I just nodded, sometimes adding a gentle question, sometimes saying nothing at all. "Do you ever feel like life just got away from you?" he asked at one point, his gaze fixed on the fading light. I thought carefully before answering. I think it happens to everyone. We all wake up one day and realize we've been running without knowing where we're going. The good part is, you can always stop. You can always choose to begin again. He smiled faintly, and I saw that same 12-year-old boy again, looking for reassurance. As the first stars appeared, I reached over and placed my hand on his arm. "You don't have to figure it all out at once," I said. "Just take one step that feels honest. The rest will follow." He nodded. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," I admitted, "but it's possible." When he left that night, he promised to visit more often. I watched him walk down the path, his shoulders a little straighter, his steps less heavy. The world around us was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like peace rather than emptiness. As I closed the door and leaned against it, I whispered to myself, "We're going to be okay." I believed it. For the first time in a long while, I truly did. The following week felt different. The house didn't seem as empty, even though it was just me most of the time. Something about that evening with Michael had shifted the air between us, like a long-stuck window finally opening. The days passed with small but meaningful exchanges. A text here, a photo of his lunch there, even a call just to ask if I'd seen the latest storm forecast. Little gestures, but they carried more weight than words could explain. One evening, while I was preparing dinner, I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, there he was again, holding a grocery bag, smiling awkwardly. "Thought I'd cook tonight," he said. I couldn't help but laugh. "You cooking? Now that's brave." He shrugged. "You taught me well enough." We moved around the kitchen like old dance partners who hadn't practiced in years, but still knew the rhythm. He chopped vegetables, slightly uneven as always, while I stirred the sauce. The aroma filled the room, mingling with our laughter and the soft hum of the radio. It wasn't about the food. It was about being together without the heaviness that had once filled the space between us. At one point, he grew quiet. "You know, Mom," he said, "that night when I told you everything, I didn't expect you to just listen. I thought you tried to fix me or lecture me, but you didn't." He paused, looking at the knife in his hand. "That helped more than anything." I smiled, setting down the spoon. Sometimes we forget that listening is its own kind of healing. I used to think being a good parent meant always having the answers, but maybe it just means being there when the questions finally come. He nodded slowly, and there was a softness in his expression I hadn't seen in years. We ate quietly after that, the kind of silence that feels full instead of empty. Outside, the rain began tapping gently against the windows, steady and calm. After dinner, we sat in the living room. The lights were dim, the air smelled faintly of garlic and rain. He looked around the room, eyes resting on the framed photos along the wall, each one a chapter of our lives. "I used to think I'd outgrow this house," he said. "Now it feels more like a part of me." I chuckled. "It always was. You just needed time to see it." He sighed. "I guess I thought being independent meant doing everything alone. Turns out it just means learning when to ask for help." "That's wisdom most people take a lifetime to find," I said quietly. "I'm proud of you." He didn't say anything right away. Then suddenly, his eyes shimmered. "I wasn't sure you'd still be proud of me after everything." I reached for his hand, warm and steady. "There's nothing you could tell me that would take that away. You've made mistakes, yes, but who hasn't? What matters is what you do after." For a while, neither of us spoke. The clock ticked softly, and the rain kept falling, as if giving rhythm to our thoughts. Before leaving that night, he stood by the door, hesitant again, like when he was a boy heading out for his first day of school. "You know," he said, "I used to think growing up meant leaving home behind, but I think it just means learning how to carry it with you." I smiled through the quiet ache in my chest. That's a good way to put it. He leaned in and hugged me, longer this time, his voice muffled against my shoulder. "I'm glad I came back." When the door finally closed, I stood there for a long moment, listening to the echo of his footsteps fade down the walkway. The house was silent again, but it didn't feel lonely anymore. The walls seemed to hum softly with the life that had just filled them. Later that night, as I sat by the window watching the rain slow to a drizzle, I realized something profound. Every family carries its share of unspoken words and quiet hurts. But sometimes it only takes one honest conversation to start the healing. And as I looked at the faint reflection of my own face in the glass, I whispered, maybe we both needed to be heard. For the first time in years, that thought didn't make me sad. It made me grateful. A few weeks later, the season began to change. The mornings carried a crispness in the air, and the first leaves had started to turn golden near the old oak outside my window. Life had found a quiet rhythm again. I spent my days tending the garden, reading on the porch, and waiting for Michael's calls that came more regularly now, Small updates about work, the friends he was reconnecting with, or the new routines he was building. One afternoon, he called and asked if he could bring someone over for dinner. His voice held a kind of excitement I hadn't heard in a long time. "Of course," I said, already smiling. I didn't ask who. It didn't matter. I just felt glad he wanted to share a piece of his new life with me. When the doorbell rang that evening, I'd opened it to find Michael standing beside a young woman with kind eyes and a nervous smile. "Mom, this is Claire," he said. "She's someone important to me." I could see the warmth in his eyes as he introduced her, the way he stood a little taller, more at ease with himself. I invited them in, the scent of baked chicken and herbs filling the air. Dinner was simple but heartfelt. Conversation flowed easily. Claire was soft-spoken but sincere, and she asked me thoughtful questions about my garden, about the old photos on the wall. Every time I glanced at Michael, he looked content, peaceful, even. Watching him laugh felt like watching sunlight return to a room that had been dim for too long. After they left, I sat alone at the table again, but this time I didn't feel that old ache of emptiness. I thought about how far we'd come, from silence and distance to this simple, quiet connection. I realized that healing doesn't arrive in grand gestures. It shows up in small, steady ways, in a shared meal, a gentle laugh, a phone call at the end of a long day. A few days later, Michael visited alone. He seemed calm, more grounded. "Mom," he said, sitting across from me again, just like that first night, "I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about, and I want to start doing things differently. I'm seeing someone about the things I was struggling with, and I'm trying to forgive myself." I felt a wave of emotion rise in me. Relief, pride, love, all tangled together. "That's the bravest thing you could do," I told him. "It takes courage to face yourself." He nodded. "You know, that night I told you everything. I expected you to be disappointed. But you weren't. You just stayed." "I'll always stay," I said softly. "That's what mothers do. Even when we don't know what to say, we stay." He smiled then, a real smile, the kind that reaches the eyes. We sat there for a while, not saying much, just listening to the faint sound of the wind brushing against the windows. The same table where pain had been spilled now held something new, understanding and a quiet kind of hope. When he left, he hugged me tighter than ever. "Thank you for not giving up on me," he said. I held on to him, whispering, "You gave me back something I thought I'd lost." That night, after he drove away, I stepped outside. The moon hung low, casting a pale light across the garden. The air was cool and still. I closed my eyes and thought about how life changes, how children become adults, how love transforms but never truly fades. For years, I'd worried about saying the wrong thing, about not doing enough, about losing the closeness we once had. But now I understood. Sometimes the greatest love is found in the quiet moments when you simply listen, when you let another person find their way while knowing they're never alone. As I turned to go back inside, I glanced once more at the table through the window, 2 chairs, side by side, waiting for the next conversation. And in that peaceful silence, I realized that some confessions, no matter how hard they are to hear, become the bridge that brings hearts back together. That was the night I finally stopped replaying the pain of the past and started cherishing the strength it gave us. And though years may pass, I know I'll always remember that evening when my son sat across from me and changed everything.